Ladies and gentlemen, what does it mean to face yourself? Not the person you present to the world, but the one who lingers in silence when all distractions fade. The one who questions, doubts, and wrestles with the contradictions of your being. This is the quiet battle you against your conflict as old as humanity itself. We often think of life as a struggle against external forces, the expectations of society, the weight of responsibilities, the curveballs of fate. Yet the fiercest adversary often resides within. It is the voice that whispers you're not enough. The one that holds on to regrets, fears, and the illusion that you must constantly be something more to find peace. The fiercest battles we fight are not with the world outside, but with ourselves. This inner conflict is a silent war, often unnoticed by those around us, yet it can consume our thoughts, energy, and sense of peace. At its core, this struggle arises from the disconnect between who we are and who we think we should be. It's a conflict shaped by doubt, fear, and an endless stream of comparisons and expectations. While the external world may present challenges, the real fight lies within the battle of you against you. This internal struggle manifests in countless ways. It's the voice in your head that questions your choices, undermines your confidence, and tells you that you're not enough. It's the nagging feeling that you should be doing more, achieving more, or becoming someone else entirely. It's the hesitation to embrace yourself fully because a part of you believes that you are fundamentally flawed. This inner conflict can feel like being trapped in a cycle of self-doubt, where you are both the judge and the defendant, the accuser and the accused. But who is it that fights, and who is being fought? This is where the illusion lies. The self that you believe you must overcome, the one that you criticize, berate, and push to be better, is not truly separate from you. It is a construct, a product of the mind shaped by societal pressures, past experiences, and internalized beliefs. You may think you are wrestling with an enemy, but in reality you are caught in a dance with your own shadow. This battle often stems from a misunderstanding of identity. We grow up learning to define ourselves through labels, achievements, and roles. We are taught to measure our worth based on how we compare to others, how productive we are, or how closely we adhere to a certain ideal. These measures become the foundation of the ego, the part of us that seeks control, validation, and approval. However, the deeper part of our being, the authentic self, knows that these external markers are fleeting and ultimately unsatisfying. The conflict arises when the ego clings to its illusions, refusing to acknowledge the truth that we are already whole. The consequences of this inner conflict can be profound. It creates anxiety as we constantly feel the need to prove ourselves. It fosters guilt and regret as we dwell on past mistakes or missed opportunities. It sows fear of failure, rejection, and even success because we tie our sense of self-worth to outcomes beyond our control. This internal struggle can prevent us from fully engaging with life, keeping us trapped in our minds rather than present in the moment. Yet, there is a way out of this struggle, not through resistance or force, but through understanding and acceptance. The first step is to recognize the illusion of separation. There is no true division between the self that criticizes and the self that is criticized. Both are aspects of the same being. By observing this dynamic without judgment, we begin to see the futility of the fight. The struggle only persists as long as we believe in its reality. When we let go of the need to be better or more, we create space to simply be. This doesn't mean abandoning growth or ambition, but rather shifting the motivation behind them. Growth becomes a natural expression of our true selves, rather than a desperate attempt to escape our perceived inadequacies. Ambition is no longer fueled by fear, but by curiosity and creativity. Living in harmony with ourselves requires a fundamental shift in perspective. Instead of seeing life as a series of problems to solve or battles to win, we can view it as a flow to be experienced. The part of us that doubts and fears is not an enemy to be defeated, but a teacher to be understood. It reveals where we are holding on to illusions, where we need to let go, and where we can open ourselves to greater awareness. This transformation does not happen overnight. It requires patience, self-compassion, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But with each step, the struggle softens. We begin to see that the self we were fighting against was never the problem, it was the resistance itself that caused the pain. When we stop resisting, we discover a deeper peace, one that comes from knowing that we are not broken, incomplete, or inadequate. The battle of you against you is not won through victory, but through surrendering the idea that you need to be anyone other than who you are. In this surrender, the conflict dissolves, leaving only the truth of your being. And in that truth, you find freedom. The struggle we face within ourselves often feels as if two opposing forces are locked in combat, one striving for control, perfection, and validation, and the other yearning for peace, acceptance, and authenticity. This tension can seem like an unending war between two irreconcilable parts of who we are. Yet, if we take a closer look, we find that this division is not real. It is an illusion, a construct of the mind that convinces us we are fragmented beings in need of repair. This illusion arises because we often identify with the surface layers of our identity, the ego. The ego is the part of us that thrives on definitions, roles, and achievements. It tells us you are your job, your success, your failures, your body, or your reputation. It seeks validation through comparison, believing that its worth depends on being more or better than someone else. The ego's nature is to divide, to create the illusion of separateness between me and them, between who we are now and who we think we should be. But beneath the ego lies something deeper, the authentic self. This self doesn't seek validation, because it understands that worth is intrinsic, not conditional. It doesn't cling to definitions, because it knows that who we are cannot be confined to labels or accomplishments. The authentic self is the part of us that simply is, unshaken by the noise of the world or the demands of the mind. The illusion of division emerges when we confuse the ego for the whole of our being. We begin to see life as a battle between these two selves, the one striving to control and the one yearning to be free. The ego builds a narrative that pits us against ourselves, framing growth as a process of conquering or defeating some part of who we are. But this narrative is flawed because it assumes that there are two separate entities at odds with each other. In reality, there is only one you, whole and complete. The internal division is like looking into a mirror and mistaking the reflection for another person. The reflection is not separate from you, it is simply an image created by light and perspective. Similarly, the ego's fears, doubts, and criticisms are not separate from your true self, they are reflections of the stories you've absorbed over time. They feel real because we give them power, believing in their truth without questioning their source. When we start to question this illusion, something shifts. We realize that the self we've been trying to fix or overcome is not a problem to be solved, but a creation of our own mind. The ego, with all its demands and insecurities, is not an enemy, it is a part of us that has misunderstood its role. Its attempts to control, protect, and define us are rooted in fear, not malice. And when we stop fighting it, we can begin to understand it. This understanding transforms the way we view our internal conflict. Instead of seeing it as a fight to be won, we see it as an opportunity for integration. The ego's need for validation can be met with compassion, not resistance. The fears that drive it can be acknowledged and gently released. And the deeper self, which has been quietly present all along, can rise to the forefront, guiding us toward a more harmonious way of being. The illusion of division also extends beyond our internal world. When we believe we are separate within ourselves, we project that separateness onto others. We see life as a series of comparisons, competitions, and boundaries. We forget that just as our true self is connected to our ego, we are connected to every other person, every other being. The same illusion that creates me versus me also creates me versus you. Dissolving this illusion within allows us to see the interconnectedness of all things. This realization doesn't mean the ego disappears. The ego will always be part of our human experience, just as the reflection remains in the mirror. But it no longer dominates our sense of self. We come to understand that we are more than the stories we tell ourselves, more than the roles we play. We are the whole, both the surface and the depth, the wave and the ocean. When the illusion of division fades, the struggle dissipates. We no longer feel the need to fight ourselves because we see that there was never truly an opponent. We are not broken, incomplete, or at odds with ourselves. We are whole, not because we have fixed or changed anything, but because we always were. In embracing this wholeness, we find a peace that cannot be shaken, a freedom that cannot be taken away. And in that freedom, we live not as divided beings, but as expressions of unity. Self-judgment is one of the most pervasive traps we face in the journey of life. It sneaks into our thoughts, shaping how we see ourselves, our actions, and our worth. It is the voice that critiques, evaluates, and compares, creating an endless cycle of dissatisfaction. At first glance, self-judgment might appear as a motivator, a way to hold ourselves accountable or push toward improvement. However, in reality, it often becomes a weight, a heavy, invisible chain that binds us to a sense of inadequacy and keeps us from fully embracing who we are. This trap stems from the deeply ingrained belief that our value is conditional. From an early age, many of us are taught to measure ourselves by external markers, grades in school, career success, physical appearance, or how others perceive us. We internalize these metrics, building a framework in which we constantly assess whether we are good enough. When we fall short of these expectations, as we inevitably do, self-judgment steps in with harsh criticisms. Why didn't I try harder? Why am I not as successful as them? What's wrong with me? Over time, this pattern creates a rift within ourselves. Instead of being our own source of support and understanding, we become our own harshest critics. Self-judgment turns us into adversaries of our own being, and life becomes a constant effort to meet the impossible standards we set for ourselves. Ironically, the more we strive to escape the discomfort of self-judgment, the more trapped we become. Every perceived failure feeds the cycle, reinforcing the belief that we are not enough as we are. One of the most insidious aspects of self-judgment is how it distorts our perception of reality. When we judge ourselves harshly, we focus disproportionately on our shortcomings and ignore our strengths. We magnify every mistake, replaying it in our minds while dismissing or minimizing our successes. This skewed lens keeps us stuck, unable to see the full picture of who we are. We become convinced that we are defined by our flaws, and this belief shapes how we engage with the world. The trap of self-judgment also limits our capacity for growth. While it may seem that criticizing ourselves is a way to improve, the truth is that self-judgment often leads to fear and paralysis. When we are overly focused on avoiding mistakes, we hesitate to take risks or try new things. We become afraid of failure, not because of the failure itself, but because of the harsh inner dialogue we know will follow. This fear stifles creativity, curiosity, and the willingness to embrace the unknown, all essential elements of growth. Breaking free from this trap requires a shift in perspective. The first step is to recognize self-judgment for what it is: a pattern of thought, not a reflection of reality. Just because a critical voice exists in your mind does not mean it speaks the truth. This voice is often a compilation of external influences, cultural norms, societal expectations, or even well-meaning advice that has been misinterpreted or internalized. Understanding this helps to create some distance between who you are and the judgments you place on yourself. Compassion is the antidote to self-judgment. Instead of criticizing yourself for falling short, imagine how you would speak to a close friend in the same situation. Would you berate them for their mistakes, or would you offer understanding and encouragement? Most likely, you would choose the latter. Extending this same kindness to yourself can be transformative. Compassion doesn't mean avoiding accountability, it means approaching your actions and choices with a sense of understanding rather than condemnation. It's about recognizing that you are human, imperfect, and worthy of grace. Another key to escaping the trap of self-judgment is to redefine how you measure your worth. True value is not something that can be calculated by achievements or the opinions of others. It is inherent, something you carry simply by being alive. Letting go of external metrics allows you to focus on living authentically, guided by what feels meaningful and fulfilling to you rather than by what you think is expected. Practicing mindfulness can also help dismantle self-judgment. By observing your thoughts without attachment, you begin to notice patterns of self-criticism as they arise. Instead of engaging with them, you can acknowledge their presence and let them pass. Over time, this practice creates space for a more balanced and compassionate perspective. Ultimately, the trap of self-judgment is a battle between who you are and who you think you should be. The path to freedom lies in realizing that there is no should to chase. You are already enough, not because of what you've done or what you will achieve, but simply because you exist. When you stop judging yourself and start accepting yourself, you open the door to a life of peace, clarity, and connection. You begin to see that the judgments were never a reflection of your worth, they were only reflections of a story you no longer need to believe. Surrender is often misunderstood. It's seen as giving up, admitting defeat, or resigning to failure. But true surrender is not about losing, it's about letting go. It is the act of releasing the need to control every outcome, to fight against the flow of life, or to resist what is. Surrender, in its deepest sense, is an act of profound strength and wisdom. It is not a sign of weakness, but an acknowledgement of a deeper truth that peace is found not in conquering, but in aligning with the natural rhythm of existence. In the battle of you against you, surrender is not about abandoning yourself or your aspirations. It is about stepping back from the internal struggle that pits one part of you against another. This struggle often comes from the belief that you must constantly prove your worth by achieving more, being better, or fixing parts of yourself you deem unworthy. The fight feels necessary because you believe that without it you might stagnate or lose purpose. But in reality, this relentless conflict drains your energy, clouds your clarity, and keeps you in a cycle of self-resistance. Surrender begins with a simple but profound realization: the fight itself is unnecessary. You don't need to battle yourself to grow, change, or improve. Growth happens naturally when you create the conditions for it, much like a plant grows when it is given sunlight, water, and soil. Struggle is not what makes a flower bloom, it is the surrender to nature's process that allows it to flourish. In the same way, when you stop fighting yourself, you open the door for authentic growth and transformation to take place. The act of surrender involves letting go of the illusion of control. Much of our internal conflict comes from trying to force life or ourselves to conform to a specific image or outcome. We cling to expectations, believing that happiness lies on the other side of achieving them. When things don't go as planned, we resist, blame, or criticize, deepening the internal struggle. Surrender, on the other hand, is the choice to trust life's unfolding. It is the willingness to release rigid expectations and accept what is without resistance. This doesn't mean giving up on your goals or aspirations. Surrender does not imply passivity or apathy. It simply means shifting your perspective. Instead of pushing against the current, you learn to flow with it. Instead of striving out of fear or insecurity, you act from a place of alignment and clarity. Surrender allows you to engage with life wholeheartedly, without the weight of unnecessary resistance. Surrender also requires trust in yourself and in the larger forces at play. This can be challenging because the ego often operates from a place of fear. It fears losing control, being vulnerable, or facing uncertainty. But when you surrender, you discover that you don't need to have all the answers or control every aspect of life. You begin to trust that you are capable of navigating whatever comes your way, and that life has a way of unfolding in ways that serve your growth, even if it doesn't always align with your plans. A powerful aspect of surrender is the liberation it brings. When you let go of the need to fight or control, you free yourself from the burden of constant striving. You no longer have to carry the weight of perfectionism or the fear of failure. You stop judging yourself for every misstep or imperfection because you understand that these are natural parts of the journey. Surrender allows you to meet yourself with compassion, recognizing that you are human, and that being human is enough. Paradoxically, surrender often leads to greater strength and resilience. When you stop resisting, you conserve your energy for what truly matters. You become more adaptable, able to face challenges without being overwhelmed by them. You find a quiet confidence in knowing that you don't need to fight to prove your worth or force things to happen. This inner peace is not a result of winning the battle, but of realizing there was no battle to fight in the first place. Surrender is not about giving up control entirely, it's about recognizing the limits of control. It's about understanding that some things are within your power, while others are not. By letting go of what you cannot control, you free yourself to focus on what you can: your perspective, your actions, and the way you show up in the world. This shift allows you to live with greater ease, clarity, and purpose. In the end, surrender is an act of love for yourself and for life as it is. It is a choice to stop fighting against reality and to embrace it fully. It is the realization that you don't need to defeat yourself to find peace, you only need to stop resisting who you are. And in that surrender, you discover a deeper freedom, a wholeness that was always there, waiting for you to let go and see it.
To live as wholeness is to step into the fullness of who you are, free from the illusion of fragmentation. It is to recognize that the parts of yourself you once believed were in conflict are not separate at all, but aspects of a unified whole. Living as wholeness is not about achieving some perfected state of being, but about embracing the truth that you are already complete, just as you are. Much of the struggle in life comes from the belief that we are divided between mind and body, thought and feeling, ambition and contentment. This sense of division creates a constant push and pull within us, a feeling of needing to reconcile opposing forces. We tell ourselves that we need to fix, improve, or become something more to feel whole. Yet this pursuit of wholeness often leads us further from it. The more we chase it outside of ourselves, the more elusive it becomes. Wholeness cannot be found in the future or in external achievements because it is not something we lack. It is our natural state, obscured only by our perceptions and beliefs. When we stop seeking wholeness as something to be attained, we begin to see that it has been present all along. It is not a destination, but a way of being, a recognition that everything we need is already within us. Living as wholeness means embracing every aspect of who we are, even the parts we may have been taught to reject. Society often encourages us to divide ourselves, to hide our vulnerabilities and imperfections, while showcasing only our strengths and successes. This fragmentation leaves us feeling incomplete because we deny parts of our humanity. But to live as wholeness is to understand that every part of you has value. Your light and your shadow, your joy and your sorrow, your strengths and your flaws, they all belong. They all contribute to the tapestry of your existence. This acceptance does not mean complacency. It does not mean you stop growing or evolving. Rather, it means you approach growth from a place of integration rather than deficiency. Instead of striving to become something you are not, you expand into more of what you already are. Growth becomes a process of unfolding, a natural expression of your wholeness, rather than a desperate attempt to fill a perceived void. Living as wholeness also transforms the way you engage with the world. When you recognize your own completeness, you no longer feel the need to seek validation from external sources. You stop measuring your worth by comparisons or achievements because you understand that your value is intrinsic. This liberation allows you to show up authentically, unburdened by the fear of judgment or rejection. You are no longer performing for the approval of others, you are simply being. Moreover, when you live as wholeness, you begin to see the world through a lens of connection rather than separation. You realize that the wholeness you experience within yourself is mirrored in the greater whole of existence. Just as you are not divided within, you are not separate from the people, environments, and experiences around you. This sense of unity fosters compassion, empathy, and a deep appreciation for life in all its forms. One of the most profound shifts that comes with living as wholeness is the ability to be fully present. When you stop seeking and striving to complete yourself, you can immerse yourself in the here and now. You are no longer distracted by thoughts of what is missing or what should be different. Instead, you experience life as it is, in all its richness and complexity. The present moment becomes a space of possibility where you can engage with life fully and authentically. Living as wholeness does not mean life will always be easy or free of challenges. Pain, loss, and uncertainty are inevitable parts of the human experience. But when you live from a place of wholeness, you face these challenges with resilience and grace. You understand that they do not diminish your completeness, they are part of it. Even in moments of difficulty, you can find a sense of peace in knowing that you are whole. This way of being is not something you need to strive for or force. It is a natural state that arises when you let go of the illusions that obscure it. It is about remembering who you are beneath the layers of conditioning, expectation, and self-doubt. It is about coming home to yourself, not as an idealized version of who you think you should be, but as the real, imperfect, and beautifully complete person you already are. Living as wholeness is an act of liberation. It frees you from the constraints of self-judgment, the burden of striving, and the illusion of separation. It allows you to embrace life fully, to show up authentically, and to connect deeply with yourself, with others, and with the world around you. And in that embrace, you discover a truth that is both simple and profound. You are and always have been whole. Freedom is often imagined as something to be gained, a state we must work toward, a goal to achieve once we've overcome obstacles, mastered ourselves, or reshaped our circumstances. But true freedom does not come from external changes or the elimination of life's difficulties. It emerges from within through the power of acceptance. When we stop resisting what is, when we let go of the need to control, fix, or fight against reality, we find a deeper liberation, the freedom to live fully and authentically no matter the circumstances. Acceptance does not mean resignation. It is not a passive act of giving up or an admission of defeat. Instead, it is an active and courageous choice to face life as it is, without denial, resistance, or unnecessary judgment. It is the willingness to see things clearly and honestly, to embrace the present moment for what it is rather than what we wish it to be. In acceptance, we find a quiet strength, the strength to let go of what we cannot change and focus our energy on what we can. One of the greatest barriers to freedom is our tendency to resist reality. We resist pain, discomfort, and uncertainty, wishing for life to be different than it is. We resist aspects of ourselves we deem unworthy or inadequate, believing we must change to be acceptable. This resistance creates tension and struggle, locking us into a cycle of dissatisfaction. The harder we fight against reality, the more trapped we feel, as if we are running in place, unable to move forward. Acceptance breaks this cycle. When we accept reality, we stop expending energy on resistance and instead redirect it toward understanding and growth. Acceptance does not mean we have to like or approve of every situation. It simply means we stop denying its existence. We acknowledge what is, even if it is uncomfortable or difficult. This acknowledgement opens the door to clarity, allowing us to respond to life's challenges with wisdom and intention rather than reaction and frustration. Freedom through acceptance also requires us to turn inward. Much of our resistance comes from within our judgments, expectations, and fears. We often hold ourselves to impossible standards, believing that we must be perfect to be worthy of love or happiness. We criticize ourselves for our flaws and mistakes, creating an internal battle that saps our energy and undermines our sense of peace. Acceptance invites us to end this battle. It asks us to embrace ourselves as we are, with all our imperfections and contradictions. This doesn't mean we stop striving for growth or improvement. Rather, it means we approach growth from a place of self-compassion rather than self-criticism. We recognize that our worth is not conditional on what we achieve or how we compare to others. It is inherent, unchanging, and complete. Through self-acceptance, we discover the freedom to be ourselves. We no longer feel the need to wear masks or hide parts of who we are to gain approval or avoid rejection. We understand that we are whole even with our imperfections. This authenticity liberates us, allowing us to engage with life and relationships more openly and honestly. We stop living in fear of judgment because we are no longer judging ourselves. Acceptance also transforms our relationship with pain and difficulty. Life is inherently unpredictable and challenges are unavoidable. When we resist these challenges, we add an extra layer of suffering on top of the pain we are already experiencing. We fight against what is, clinging to the idea that things should be different. Acceptance doesn't eliminate pain, but it reduces the additional suffering created by resistance. It allows us to face difficulties with grace, understanding that they are a natural part of the human experience. In acceptance, we find the freedom to let go of control. So much of our anxiety comes from trying to control the uncontrollable, other people's actions, outcomes of events, or the passage of time. Acceptance teaches us that control is an illusion. When we release the need to control, we feel a profound sense of relief. We realize that we don't have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. Instead, we can trust the flow of life, knowing that we have the inner strength to navigate whatever comes our way. Freedom through acceptance is not a one-time achievement, but an ongoing practice. It requires patience, mindfulness, and self-compassion. It asks us to meet each moment with openness, even when it is difficult. It invites us to soften our resistance, to lean into life rather than push against it. And in doing so, it offers us a profound gift, the ability to live fully and freely, unburdened by the weight of resistance. Ultimately, acceptance is a path to liberation. It frees us from the struggle against ourselves, against others, and against life. It reminds us that we don't have to fight to be whole, to be worthy, or to find peace. These things are already ours, waiting for us to embrace them. Through acceptance, we discover the profound truth that freedom is not something we must chase. It is something we uncover when we let go.in the end. Freedom through acceptance is about realizing that true liberation comes not from the external world, but from within. It is a process of letting go of the need to control, resist, or force outcomes. Acceptance does not mean settling for less or resigning to a life of passivity. Rather, it is the active choice to embrace the present moment and to see things as they are, without judgment or denial. Through acceptance, we release ourselves from the internal struggle and find peace in the flow of life. By accepting ourselves, flaws and all, we uncover a deep sense of freedom to be authentic, to grow without fear, and to face life's challenges with grace. The resistance that once kept us locked in a cycle of dissatisfaction is replaced by a sense of flow, where we no longer feel the need to fight against reality or wish things were different. Acceptance becomes the key to living fully, embracing each moment, and discovering that the freedom we seek is already within us, waiting to be acknowledged. True freedom is not about perfection or control. It is about releasing the need for either and finding peace in the present, in the wholeness of who we are. Through acceptance, we stop striving for an ideal and begin to embrace life as it is. And in that embrace, we find a deeper sense of purpose, clarity, and joy. Freedom through acceptance is not just a concept, it is a way of being, a way to live with an open heart, fully engaged with life, unburdened by the weight of resistance.